And then in verse 16 is something that's very kind of near and dear to me. And that is, the name of this podcast is Cwic Media, Culture and Practical Theology. And I believe that our theology, that our belief that the gospel is very practical. And I try to point that out as much as I can. And right here I see a truth that lines right up with that. And it says here in verse 16, ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? In other words, that's how you know if something is true or not, more than anything else, I think, is you hash it out. You take a look at what are the results. You can listen to someone and they can be very flowery. They can be very convincing with something. But what are the results of this? What are the fruits that have happened from this? That's how I think you ought to look at things. Think about ideologies today, and we're seeing that in politically, the left and the right. So if we look back and we look at Marxism with Lenin, and then later with Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot and etc., Venezuela right now, we see an ideology there that people seem to want to continue to return to over and over again. Because up front, you have the sheep's clothing. This is empathetic, this is fair for everybody. But what are the fruits of this ideology? To me, there's a ravenous wolf behind it. And the same goes on the other end of the political spectrum. When we focus too much on nationalism, or we focus too much on a fundamental view of judgment and order even, too much, and we don't give any leeway to things, then there's a lot of things in sheep's clothing that you could say, hey, we're taking care of things so that you don't need to, or we are making things right, or yes, you need to be judgmental against somebody who does something wrong. But behind that, what are the fruits of that? Are people hurt because of that? Do people suffer because of that? What happens to you when you adopt that as a person into your heart? And so these ideologies can go out there, and the fruits of these things that we look at in anything in life, not just politically here, I'm just giving an example, but anything in life, we can look at the fruits to get a much better idea of what is the truth of something, an idea, the words that are coming from someone. I think that's what matters the most. Words are very much secondary. They're important. But moving into this trigger culture that we're going into, where we're offended by what everybody says, let's look at what the meat is behind it. I think we look there first, and then we talk about speech. And he follows up with a phrase that says, wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them. I think that's a really good principle to follow, a very practical principle to follow. And then he says something going back to the speech part, important but secondary. He says, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. So the speech is important, but it matters pretty much to nothing if there isn't any meat behind it, if there isn't any practical use behind it. If you are pure theory, if you are pure words, but there is no meat behind it, then watch out. Then there is a problem. We see examples of this, people sitting in ivory towers where this happens, or they are made up as white sepulchres, as Jesus says later on. And it reminds me a little bit of Joseph Smith history, where he's in the first vision and he's being told, look, there's a lot of people that are going to honor me with their lips, right? But I'm paraphrasing here, but their hearts are far from me, I think it is, or their minds or hearts are far from me. And that's a great example of exactly what Jesus is saying here. Not everybody who says, Lord, Lord, is going to enter into the kingdom of God, but the people that do the will of the Father.